Hello, everyone. Welcome to New Gen Politics. So, Trump wants to put a new 25% tariff, basically a flat tax tariff, on all European products coming into America. But at the same time, he only wants to put a 10% tariff on China. And so, this has left a lot of people confused as to why are you treating Europe worse than you would treat China? And there's a couple reasons for this. Mainly, Trump's argument is reciprocal tariffs, that Europeans just put incredibly high tariffs on our products compared to what we put on theirs. And so Trump just wants to match it, basically. That's like one of the reasons, but it goes a little deeper than that, which is that the Europeans are dependent on the US, fundamentally. If you look at the world right now, there's three superpowers: the United States, Russia, and China. And you basically have to cozy up to one of those if you're any other country in the world. That's kind of just how it works. The small guys get protection from the big guys. And even all of Europe combined, Western Europe, still doesn't compare to any of the three major powers. So Europeans have to cozy up to somebody. For the last 100 years, they've been cozying up to America. We went and saved them. We're great trading partners. We share a lot of intelligence. Culturally, we're the most similar to them out of the big three. So there is a relationship there, but over time, that relationship has gone from Europeans basically being our vassals, which sounds pretty demeaning, but that's basically what they were, is you're the small guys who follow us, the big guy, and you kind of do what we say. They've kind of turned from being vassals to being dependents. And that's where Trump is really finding issue with this, is that the Europeans are so deeply entrenched in like the American economy. Like they're so dependent on the American economy for their survival, not just through trade, but through all the resources we give them, the information we give them. We basically facilitate European modern life. And we've been, for a long time, willing to take that hit to keep them afloat, essentially, through all the programs, the international programs. We pay for all that. We pay for NATO. We fund more than any other country, even the whole of Europe combined. And so Trump's saying, look, we are America. We're the strong guys. We're the guys who came and saved you. We're the world's superpower. You are dragging us down. You're making the quality of life for the average American worse than you are making it better. You are a dependent, and kind of a one we don't particularly like anymore because of some of the ways you're behaving, which is like how J.D. Vance has said, the banning of free speech, the kind of anti-religious rhetoric, anti-patriotic rhetoric, how the Europeans constantly talk down to Americans, thinking they're better than us. All of that is unpalatable to most Americans. They don't want it anymore. They don't like it. And Trump is kind of the embodiment of that American spirit to a certain degree, more American anger than American spirit. But so he's kind of the embodiment of Americans' anger. And so when you go and target Europe, and basically Trump is saying again, you guys got to do what we say. And we're not going to take the hits for you anymore. If you're going to be a vassal, if we're going to protect you, then you're going to have to pay up. You're going to have to be, at the very least, an equal trading partner. And probably you should be more dependent on us than we are you on the books, right? Because right now it looks like all the stuff we give Europe, why? It's weird. It looks like we're kind of dependent on them, which is certainly not the case. Now, it is beneficial to have Europeans as allies to America because you don't want them cozying up to another superpower. You don't want them cozying up to Russia. I mean, that sounds crazy right now, but if we totally cut them off and said, go find someone else, there's two options, and it's either Russia or China. More likely they would cozy up to China, but we don't want that either because they're a competitor. There's a zero-sum game with the amount of countries in the world and their support. And so we want to keep European support, but at the same time, we need them to step up and not drag us down, especially if we're going into trade wars and any sort of conflict with the other world powers. And so the Europeans are going to start paying more of the fair share of the reciprocal tariffs with the 25%. And they're throwing a big fit, but they don't know what to do about it because there is nothing they can do about it. And they try to act like they're equal partners to the U.S., but no, you're our vassals. Like, If we say jump and we set it with all our might, you would say how high. That's the relationship between Europe and America fundamentally, because you guys aren't strong enough. Now, Europe could be strong enough. Macron, to his credit, not a big fan of Macron, but he has said for several years that, hey, I don't think America really likes us that much anymore, and I don't think they're going to come and save us. If we get into a military conflict, I'm not so certain. They say they will, but I'm not so certain that they'll actually come and save us. We should probably make a standing European army. We should probably start more industry in Europe. We should probably be less dependent on Russian oil. We should probably be more independent and try to raise ourselves to be a world power instead of being totally dependent on the U.S. And then when the U.S. says they don't want to do something, try to like shame them into doing it, because that's not working anymore. And a lot of times it's having the opposite effect, where you can see by Trump, who just doesn't care what the European leaders say, for better or worse. He totally disregards their opinion because he sees them as vassals to a certain degree, right? He's a little bit more cordial than that. But certainly he's like, look, you guys have no power here, and we're not going to take the hits for you anymore. This is devolved from like a cultural cooperation to a purely like economic business deal, and you're ripping us off. And that's not great. We want to be close culturally to our European allies, but at the same time, because we're culturally close, we want to enforce things like, hey, we're not going to deal with you if you don't have freedom of speech, because you not having freedom of speech in the Western world will influence our people, our politicians, to get rid of free speech too. We don't want that. So like the cultural degradation that's happening in Europe, if we continue to let them do that, that could really affect us, and that wouldn't be good. So Trump should also focus on that. He doesn't talk as much about that as JD Vance does, but there's another key issue as to why we should kind of force Europe to do what we want to a certain degree. And the tariffs are just kind of putting them back in their place and saying like, hey, we're not being ripped off by you guys anymore, and we kind of have the final say. And there could be a really good relationship. Like Europeans could still be dependent on the U.S., but it could be, a lot better for all parties involved. It just depends on how these negotiations shake out. Now, the Europeans somehow think that Trump can't hear them when they have these conferences talking about how much they hate Trump and don't like the U.S., and it's totally fine to start gaining independence. Because like I said, there's 3 powers in the world, and Europe's not one of them. Sorry. If you want to gain independence, you have to do the things that are required to do so. The problem is they were so entrenched on U.S. benevolence that they just don't have the means to do that right now. And so currently they still are dependent on the U.S. And so Trump's trying to take advantage of that as much as possible. I would love to see a stronger Europe, because a stronger Europe with us as partners is much better against Russia. It's much better against China. Europe, that despite all its many, many faults currently, is like the anti-freedom of speech, anti-religion stuff. That stuff's really, really bad, but it's not a very long-standing tradition. Most of European history has been, they're relatively moral, relatively philosophical. They value education. They value hard work. There is good things about Europe culturally. It's just this weird paint of pseudo-communism that's taken over the last several decades. But once that's gone, it's good to have a place like Europe gain more power. And we want that to be proportional to ours, but we would love to see Europeans be happy and healthy and successful, but not at the expense of Americans, which is what Trump is saying right now is happening, is you guys are ripping us off. We don't have the same amount of tariffs for the cars that come in our country versus the cars that come into your country. Why is that? Well, because we're babying you. And we want to baby you to some degree because you're kind of our vassal, but we don't want you ripping us off, because then what's the point? What's the point of having you as a vassal if you're just a dead weight, the millstone around the neck? So we'll see how this relationship evolves. JD Vance seems pretty adamant about getting some very specific cultural things done. Trump seems to not want to play around with Europe very much at the moment. China's a different beast entirely when we're talking about the tariffs, because we are significantly dependent on them for certain things. And so that's a relationship we can't cut off willy-nilly, especially like medical stuff we're really dependent on. So Trump wants to handle this European thing first and then discuss more with Russia and China. Because then if you have the backing of Europe, you have a Europe that follows in line culturally and economically with America and our interests. Suddenly we have a lot more sway over what happens in Asia, what happens in Eastern Europe, what happens in the rest of the world, but the rest of the world is not as concerning to us as the threats of China and Russia. So that's my thoughts on this. I think it's interesting. I think it's good. I like the tariffs. I think wielding it as a weapon, either legitimately wanting money from the tariffs or just using it as a threat, is good, especially when it's reciprocal. He's not threatening 1,000% tariffs for no reason because, he wants some random goal or objective or something. He's just saying, highest we're going right now is reciprocal. If things get worse, they may get higher. But at the moment, he wants a fair deal. And Americans are sick of babying other countries, especially when our country has been on the decline for so long. So that's my thoughts on this. If you made it all the way through the video, I appreciate it. If you like the content, like, share, and subscribe. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Thank you for watching.